When I joined United, they were worth 10 million. It's now worth 2 billion.
How did Sir Alex Ferguson get you to keep coming back every single year, all the teams at Manchester United, and do it again?
One man who's been part of the tapestry of the history of this club has won 5 FA Cups, 4 League Cups, 10 Charity Community Shields, 1 European Cup Winners' Cup, 1 European Super Cup, 2 Champions League titles, Intercontinental Cup, 1 FIFA Club World Cup, and 13 Premier League titles. The impossible dream made possible by the greatest British manager ever, Sir Alex Ferguson.
May 19th, 2013. Old Trafford stood in stunned silence. Not the roaring silence of anticipation before kickoff, but the hollow, suffocating silence that comes when something irreplaceable is leaving forever. Sir Alex Ferguson had just managed his final game. 26 years. 38 trophies. An empire built from the ground up, brick by brick, trophy by trophy, until Manchester United stood as the most dominant force in English football history. Now the architect was walking away, waving to the Stretford end one last time, tears in his eyes, leaving behind a kingdom that looked invincible from the outside but was secretly held together by his will alone. What followed wasn't just a managerial transition. It was the collapse of an empire. This is the story of Manchester United's lost decade. The story of how the greatest club in England became a cautionary tale about what happens when legend becomes burden, when history becomes prison, when the man who built everything takes all the blueprints with him. That final afternoon at Old Trafford, the sun setting on Ferguson's reign, everyone believed the dynasty would continue. How could it not? United had just won the Premier League by 11 points. The trophy cabinet gleamed with decades of silverware. The stadium still intimidated visiting teams. The brand was global, the revenues astronomical, the tradition unbreakable. But beneath the surface, cracks had formed, invisible to fans, perhaps even to the board, but undeniable to anyone who looked closely. The squad was aging. Rio Ferdinand, Ryan Giggs, Paul Scholes, legends all, but their primes had passed. The midfield lacked creativity. The recruitment had become stale, reactive rather than strategic. Ferguson had papered over these weaknesses through sheer force of personality, through tactical brilliance and man management genius that extracted maximum performance from declining assets. Remove Ferguson, and suddenly the weaknesses became catastrophic. The appointment of David Moyes was doomed from the start, though nobody wanted to admit it then. Ferguson handpicked his successor, a manager who'd done solid work at Everton but had won nothing, a man tasked with following the greatest manager in football history. Moyes inherited a squad that needed surgery, a dressing room full of players accustomed to Ferguson's iron authority, and a boardroom that expected immediate success. He was given a 6-year contract, a supposed vote of confidence that became an anchor around his neck. Within months, the empire began to crumble. Players who'd performed miracles under Ferguson suddenly looked ordinary. The aura of invincibility evaporated. Results deteriorated. United went from champions to 7th place in one catastrophic season. Moyes was sacked after 10 months, becoming the first casualty of a succession crisis that nobody had properly planned for. Ferguson wasn't just a manager. He was the infrastructure. He controlled everything: transfers, youth development, media relations, dressing room discipline, tactical philosophy, club culture. He was dictator and father figure, feared and loved in equal measure. United had become entirely dependent on one man's genius, and when that man left, the organization discovered it had no systems in place to replace him. The power vacuum was immediate and total. Who decided transfer strategy now? Who set the club's playing philosophy? Who commanded respect in the dressing room? Nobody knew. The board scrambled. The players floundered. The fans watched in horror as the empire Ferguson built for a quarter-century collapsed within a single season. Old Trafford, once a fortress, became a graveyard for managerial ambition. Ed Woodward became the face of United's commercial dominance and football decline. The executive vice-chairman excelled at negotiating sponsorship deals, noodle partners in Asia, tractor partnerships in Russia, revenue streams that turned Manchester United into a billion-pound brand. But football was secondary. Woodward approached the sport like a business problem to be solved through spending rather than a craft requiring vision and coherence. The managerial carousel began spinning, and with each revolution, United lost more of whatever identity remained. David Moyes wanted time to rebuild. Louis van Gaal wanted possession-based control. Jose Mourinho wanted defensive pragmatism. Ole Gunnar Solskjaer wanted counter-attacking nostalgia. 4 different philosophies in 6 years. No continuity. No plan. Just panic disguised as ambition. Van Gaal arrived in 2014 with pedigree, Ajax, Barcelona, Bayern Munich, and a philosophy built on suffocating possession. United became boring, safe, sterile. They controlled matches but created nothing. The football was painful to watch, a slow death by sideways passing that drained Old Trafford of its energy. Van Gaal won the FA Cup in 2016 but was sacked immediately after because his style was deemed incompatible with United's attacking tradition. Enter Mourinho, the pragmatist, the winner, the manager supposed to restore glory through results rather than aesthetics. He delivered trophies, Europa League, League Cup, second place in the league, but the football was joyless, the atmosphere toxic, the decline in quality masked by Mourinho's ability to grind out results. When that stopped working, when the squad revolted against his methods, he was gone too. Solskjaer was supposed to be different, the club legend who understood United's DNA, who could restore the attacking football and the feel-good factor. For a while, it worked. But nostalgia isn't strategy. Vibes aren't tactics. Solskjaer's reign was smoke and mirrors, occasional brilliance masking structural incompetence, individual talent papering over tactical chaos. He finished second, then third, raised hopes, then crashed spectacularly when the squad's limitations were exposed. After him came Erik Ten Hag, the latest savior, the latest attempt to impose order on chaos. And still, the question remains unanswered. What is Manchester United's identity? What is their footballing philosophy? Nobody knows. Not the board, not the managers, not the players. A decade after Ferguson left, United remain a ship without a compass, drifting between styles, managers, and broken promises, searching for an identity they lost when the only man who truly understood them walked away. Over £1 billion. That's how much Manchester United spent in the decade after Ferguson, trying to buy their way back to dominance. The spending was obscene, scattergun, desperate, throwing money at problems without understanding what the problems actually were. Angel Di Maria arrived for a British record fee, played like he'd rather be anywhere else, and left after one miserable season. Radamel Falcao came on loan, a striker who'd lost his edge after injury, contributed 4 league goals, became a cautionary tale. Alexis Sanchez arrived from Arsenal on wages that broke the wage structure, £500,000 per week to score 5 goals in 18 months. The transfer strategy wasn't strategy at all. It was brand management disguised as football operations, signing names rather than fitting pieces into a coherent system. Paul Pogba returned to Old Trafford for a world record £89 million in 2016, 6 years after leaving on a free transfer. It should have been a redemption arc. Instead, it became a symbol of everything wrong with post-Ferguson United. Pogba was undeniably talented, capable of moments of sublime skill, of match-winning performances when the mood struck him. But consistency eluded him. Discipline frustrated him. He played for himself rather than the team, his social media presence larger than his on-field impact, his agent constantly flirting with other clubs. For 6 years, United built their midfield around Pogba, and for 6 years, it never quite worked. When he left on a free transfer in 2022, completing the circle of waste, nobody was surprised. He wasn't the problem. He was a symptom of the problem. United bought stars without systems, talent without tactics, names without knowing how those names fit together. Meanwhile, Manchester City signed Kevin De Bruyne and built a machine. Liverpool signed Virgil van Dijk and transformed their defence. Even Arsenal, mocked for years as also-rans, rebuilt with intelligence, young, hungry players who fit a clear tactical system overseen by a manager with vision. United signed Cristiano Ronaldo at 36, disrupting a squad that had finally started showing promise, prioritizing nostalgia and shirt sales over footballing sense. They signed Casemiro and Varane at 30 and 29 respectively, past their primes but available because their former clubs had moved on. The contrast was damning. Rivals operated with strategy, with long-term planning, with recruitment aligned to a clear footballing identity. United operated like a panicked gambler doubling down on losing hands, spending billions but falling further behind rivals who spent smarter, not necessarily more. The players became bigger than the club. That sentence would have been unthinkable under Ferguson, but it became United's reality in the years after. Dressing room leaks became routine, players complaining to journalists, agents briefing against managers, egos clashing without anyone possessing the authority to restore order. Paul Pogba's relationship with Jose Mourinho became a media circus. Cristiano Ronaldo's second stint ended in acrimony, an explosive interview where he burned every bridge. Marcus Rashford, once the symbol of United's future, became inconsistent and uncommitted, his performances fluctuating wildly between world-class and anonymous. The culture had rotted from the inside. Players earned fortunes, signed commercial deals, built personal brands, and somewhere along the way, forgot that Manchester United was supposed to be bigger than any individual. The shadow Ferguson cast grew longer with each passing year, each failed manager, each false dawn. Every new appointment was measured against him. Every poor result invited comparisons to his reign. The weight of history, once a source of strength, became a millstone. How do you rebuild when every decision is judged against 26 years of dominance? How do you establish new traditions when the old ones loom so large? United became trapped in their own past, unable to move forward because moving forward meant acknowledging that the Ferguson era was over, that the empire had fallen, that what worked then wouldn't work now. The board wanted Ferguson's success without Ferguson's methods. The fans wanted Ferguson's trophies without Ferguson's patience during the lean years. Everyone wanted the glory without acknowledging the reality. The football world had changed, and United had been left behind. 10 years. A decade of decline, of chaos, of billion-pound mistakes and managerial casualties. The theatre of dreams became the theatre of broken promises, where hope arrived each summer with new signings and died each spring when Champions League qualification hung in the balance. Young fans who started supporting United at the end of Ferguson's reign have known nothing but disappointment. Mediocrity disguised as progress, sixth-place finishes celebrated like titles. The question haunts Old Trafford, whispered in corridors, debated in pubs, feared by executives who know the answer but won't face it. When will Manchester United wake up from this nightmare? When will the empire rise again? Or has the damage become so deep, the culture so toxic, the shadow so long, that United are doomed to remain a museum of former glory, a cautionary tale about what happens when greatness becomes a prison? The boss left the building in May 2013. A decade later, Manchester United are still searching for the blueprints he took with him. And the theatre of dreams sleeps on.